The coffee in the observation lounge tasted like recycled disappointment, which James supposed was fitting given that it probably was recycled disappointment. He stared out at Mars hanging in the viewport like a rusty marble, while his hands trembled slightly around the cup. Not from fear, exactly. More from the sudden realization that his entire career had been leading to this moment, and he was absolutely, categorically unprepared for it. Dr. Riley. The station administrator's voice crackled through his comm implant. Commander Sierra's shuttle is docking at Bay 7. Please proceed to the diplomatic reception area. James set down his coffee and caught his reflection in the polished wall panel. His hair was doing that thing where it stuck up on one side despite his best efforts, and there was a mysterious stain on his collar that he couldn't remember acquiring. First contact with humanity's new alien allies, and he looked like he'd lost a fight with his laundry. Perfect. The diplomatic reception area was mercifully empty when he arrived, giving him 30 seconds to practice his greeting. Welcome to the station, Commander. It's an honor no, too formal. Hey there, I'm James, you're too casual. Greetings, I am Dr. James Riley, xenobiologist, and he stopped. Why did he sound like a malfunctioning tour guide bot? The airlock hissed open. She was tall. That was his first coherent thought. His second was that the intelligence briefings had dramatically undersold what humanoid meant. Commander Sierra could have walked down any street on Earth without drawing more than appreciative glances, except for the ears. Those elegant, elongated ears that swept back from her head and tapered to delicate points, barely visible through the dark hair she'd pulled into a practical braid. She wore something that looked like it had been designed by someone who couldn't decide between military dress uniform and tactical body armor, settling for both. It hugged her frame in a way that suggested it was probably smart fabric, adjusting to movement and threat levels. The deep blue material seemed to shimmer with embedded circuitry. Dr. Riley. Her voice was warm, her English flawless but carrying an accent that seemed to dance around vowels in unexpected ways. I hope your journey to the station was pleasant. I live here, James blurted out, then immediately wanted to crawl into an escape pod. I mean, I've been stationed here for 3 months. Not that I live in the docking bay. That would be weird. I have quarters, normal quarters. Where I live. One of her ears twitched, and he wasn't sure if that was good or bad. I see. Was that amusement in her eyes? Then you can show me to my quarters as well. I understand we are to be neighbors for the duration of the exchange. Right, yes, neighbors, I can do that. He gestured toward the corridor, nearly smacking his hand against the doorframe. This way. They walked in silence for a moment, and James became acutely aware that she moved with a kind of effortless grace that made him feel like he was clomping around in gravity boots. The station's corridors suddenly seemed narrower than he remembered. I must confess, Sierra said, breaking the silence, I am curious about human xenobiologists. On Xylar, we have geneticists and ecologists, but the concept of a scientist dedicated to studying other species is relatively new to us. Well, technically, all species were alien to us until about 40 years ago when we confirmed we weren't alone in the universe. So xenobiology was more theoretical until, you showed up. He winced. Your people, I mean, not you specifically, although you did show up just now, obviously. Obviously, she repeated, and there was definitely amusement there now. They reached the residential section, where the station's architecture shifted from utilitarian gray to something attempting to be welcoming. Someone had even installed planters with actual earth plants, though James suspected the ferns were slowly losing their will to live in the recycled air. Your quarters are here, he said, keying in the access code. They're configured for Xylarian atmospheric preferences, though I understand it's close enough to Earth standard that you won't need breathing apparatus. Our worlds are remarkably similar in many ways, Sierra agreed. She stepped into the room, glancing around with those sharp eyes. Though Xylar's gravity is approximately 30% stronger than Earth's, We adapt easily to your environment, but you might find ours rather heavy. She bent to pick up the supply crate that had been left inside her quarters, hefting it with one hand like it weighed nothing. James had wrestled with an identical crate that morning and needed both arms plus some creative profanity. "I'll keep that in mind if I ever visit," he managed. Sierra set the crate down and turned to face him fully. "I hope you will. Cultural exchange works best in both directions, don't you think?" "Absolutely. That's actually the whole point of this program. 6 months of shared living space, joint research projects, learning each other's customs and communication styles." He was doing it again, reciting the mission briefing like a nervous cadet. "What I mean is, yes, I'd like that." "Good." She smiled, and it transformed her face from merely striking to something that made his heart do an unexpected somersault. "Then perhaps we should begin with something simple. On Xylar, it is customary to share a meal when forming new partnerships. Does Earth have similar traditions?" "We do, actually. There's a cafeteria on Deck 9 that's supposedly pretty good, though I should warn you the chef has a disturbing fondness for reconstituted protein. I have survived military rations that could be used as hull patching in emergencies. I think I can manage your cafeteria." James laughed, surprising himself. "Okay, but if you get food poisoning on your first day, that's going to make me look really bad as a cultural liaison. Then I will be sure to compliment the cuisine regardless of its actual quality. We Xylarians are trained in diplomacy." Her ear twitched again, and he was starting to think that might be her equivalent of a wink. They stood there for a moment, and James realized he was smiling like an idiot. 6 months suddenly seemed both impossibly long and not nearly enough time. "I should let you settle in," he said finally. "We have a full schedule starting tomorrow. Briefings, facility tour, safety protocols. All very official and boring. Spectacularly boring, but mandatory. I shall prepare myself accordingly." She moved toward the door and he stepped back to give her space. "Thank you, Dr. Riley. This has been a most interesting welcome." "James," he said impulsively. "You can call me James." "James," she repeated, testing the name. "Then you should call me Sierra. Commander is for official reports and people I don't like." He was still smiling when he reached his own quarters 3 doors down. The assignment suddenly didn't seem quite so terrifying. Complicated, certainly. Prone to embarrassing moments, definitely. But maybe, just maybe, it might actually be interesting. His comm chimed with the next day's schedule and he groaned. 0800 start time for orientation. He set his alarm, shed his stained shirt, and fell into bed wondering what color Xylarian blood was and whether it would be inappropriate to ask. Through the wall, he could hear the faint sounds of Sierra moving around her quarters, and he found himself hoping that she was settling in well, that she didn't regret accepting this assignment, that the next 6 months wouldn't be a disaster. His last thought before sleep was that he really needed to do something about his hair. The station's gym was empty at 0500, which was exactly why James had chosen this time. He'd been on the station long enough to know that most personnel didn't crawl out of bed until at least 0630, giving him a blissful hour of solitude with the resistance machines and his own thoughts. He was 3 sets into his routine when the door hissed open. Sierra walked in wearing what appeared to be Xylarian workout attire, which consisted of a sleeveless top and fitted pants that looked like they'd been painted on with some kind of advanced polymer. Her ears swiveled toward him immediately, and she smiled. "James, I did not expect to find anyone here at this hour." He fumbled the weight bar he'd been holding, catching it before it crashed into his foot. "Same. I mean, I didn't expect you, not that you shouldn't be here. The gym is for everyone, obviously. On Xylar, we train before dawn, old military habit." She approached one of the machines, examining it with curiosity. "Your exercise equipment is quite different from ours. May I?" "Sure, go ahead. That one's for leg presses. You adjust the weight here." He reached over to show her the settings and accidentally brushed against her arm. It was like touching warm steel. "Sorry." No apology necessary. She settled into the machine, testing the weight he'd been using. She pressed it smoothly, without any visible strain, then frowned. This seems calibrated for much lower gravity physiology. That's actually the highest setting, James admitted. Sierra looked at the machine, then at him, then back at the machine. Ah, I see. She stood, moving to a pull-up bar instead. Perhaps I will use simpler equipment. James tried to focus on his own workout, but it was impossible not to watch as she went through a routine that would have hospitalized him. She moved through pull-ups like they were a casual warm-up, her muscles flowing under her skin with mechanical precision. When she dropped into one-armed push-ups, alternating hands with each rep, he gave up any pretense of exercising and just stared. Her ear twitched in his direction without her head turning. "You are staring, James." He jerked his attention back to his own weights, face burning. "No, I was just checking your form, making sure you weren't going to hurt yourself." Professional courtesy. "I appreciate your concern." She flipped upright in a movement that defied physics as he understood it, landing in a crouch that transitioned smoothly into a standing position. "Though I should mention that Zalarian hearing is quite acute. I can detect your elevated heart rate from here." "That's because I'm exercising," he said too quickly. "Of course." She walked toward him with that fluid grace that made him think of predatory cats. "I have been reviewing human cultural databases. There is something I am trying to understand." "Okay. Why do humans find physical capability attractive, but become embarrassed when observed demonstrating or observing such capability?" James opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. That's a complicated question." "Most interesting questions are." She tilted her head, and her ears shifted to focus on him completely. "On Xylar, physical prowess is the primary indicator of genetic fitness. We assess each other openly. Courtship begins with demonstrations of strength, speed, and combat skill. But humans seem to conduct these assessments secretly." "We're not assessing, I wasn't," he took a breath. "Human attraction is more complicated than just physical strength. Yes, I have read about your concepts of personality compatibility, shared interests, emotional intelligence. But you still value physical fitness, yes. Your entertainment media is full of physically capable individuals." "Well, sure, but..." "Then why the embarrassment? You are watching me exercise. I am watching you struggle with those weights. This should be normal exchange of information for potential compatibility assessment. I am not assessing you for compatibility." The words came out louder than he intended, echoing in the empty gym. Sierra's ears flattened slightly against her head. "I have offended you. I apologize. Human courtship protocols are clearly more nuanced than the research indicated." "No, wait, I'm not offended. I'm just..." He set down the weights before he dropped them. "You thought I was evaluating you as a potential mate. Was that incorrect?" She looked genuinely confused now. "The elevated heart rate, the dilated pupils, the way you smell differently when you look at me. You can smell my emotions." "Not emotions precisely. Hormonal changes. Zalarians evolved as persistent hunters. We track by scent, among other things." She moved closer, close enough that he could see the faint pattern of what might have been freckles or markings across her cheekbones. "Are you saying humans do not do this?" "We definitely do not have scent tracking capabilities, no." "Then how do you determine if someone is interested in you?" James laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to it. "If we figure that out, we'll let you know. Most of human dating is just controlled panic and hoping you're reading the signals right." "That sounds inefficient." "It really is." They stood there for a moment, close enough that James could feel the heat radiating from her skin. She was studying him with those sharp eyes, her head tilted in a way that suggested active analysis. "So you were not evaluating me for genetic compatibility when you watched me exercise?" "I was." He struggled for honesty. "I was admiring your physical capabilities, yes, but not in a clinical way. More in a wow, that's impressive and aesthetically pleasing way." Aesthetically pleasing. She tested the phrase. Your face becomes red when you say this. Is that a positive indicator? It's an embarrassment indicator. But why embarrassed? On Xyler, if someone demonstrates superior capability, admiration is the expected response. To hide that admiration would be considered dishonest. Humans are very comfortable with social dishonesty. We call it politeness. Sierra laughed, a sound that seemed to resonate in his chest. I am beginning to understand why your people took so long to achieve interstellar travel. You spend so much energy hiding what you think and feel, says the woman from a species that literally sniffs out lies. We do not consider honesty a vulnerability. She reached out, and for a heart-stopping moment he thought she might touch his face, but her hand stopped just short. May I ask you something directly in the Zalarian way? Sure, he managed. Do you find me attractive, James? Every alarm in his head screamed that this was a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. She was his assignment. They had 6 months of close quarters ahead. There were probably regulations about this. Definitely regulations about this. Yes, he heard himself say. Her smile was like sunrise breaking over a new world. Good, that makes this much simpler. She stepped back, giving him space to breathe. Now I understand the human confusion. You are attracted, but believe you should hide this attraction to maintain professional distance. Something like that. But we will be working closely for 6 months, living 3 doors apart, sharing meals and research. Would it not be simpler to acknowledge the attraction and determine if we are compatible? Simpler maybe, but humans don't always do simple. I am noticing this about your species. She moved back toward the equipment. I will continue my workout now. You may watch if you wish. I will not be offended by honest admiration. James picked up his weights with shaking hands, trying to figure out if he'd just been flirted with, or if this was all some massive cross-cultural misunderstanding. Sierra moved through her routine with focused intensity, occasionally glancing his way with what might have been amusement. His comm chimed. 0600. The gym would start filling up with morning personnel soon. I should get to breakfast, he said. I will join you. I am curious about your reconstituted protein. She grabbed a towel, barely looking winded despite the workout that should have left her gasping. And perhaps you can explain more about human courtship protocols. I find I am very interested in learning these nuances. That's going to take more than one breakfast. Fortunate then that we have 6 months. They walked toward the showers, and James couldn't shake the feeling that his carefully planned professional distance had just been demolished by a woman who thought honesty was a virtue, and human social conventions were puzzles to be solved. He was either about to have the most interesting 6 months of his life or a complete disaster, possibly both. The cafeteria at midday was a study in controlled chaos. James had found a corner table where he could review his notes on Xylarian cellular biology without getting jostled by the lunch crowd. He was 3 paragraphs into a fascinating analysis of their enhanced muscle fiber density when a tray slammed down across from him. Sierra sat without waiting for an invitation, her own tray loaded with what appeared to be twice the portion size of anyone else in the room. I have a question, she announced. James marked his place on the datapad. Good afternoon to you too. Yes, good afternoon. My question is about human personal space. I have been observing the crew, and I noticed that humans maintain specific distances from each other based on relationship status. But the measurements seem inconsistent. Okay, he wasn't sure where this was going. For instance, you are currently sitting 0.8 meters away from me. Yesterday at breakfast, you sat 1.2 meters away. The day before, 1.5. Are you conducting some kind of experiment, or is this unconscious behavior? James nearly choked on his coffee. You've been measuring the distance between us. I have been measuring many things. It is important to gather data. She pulled out her own datapad, swiping through what appeared to be detailed charts. I have also cataloged your average speaking volume in different contexts, the frequency of your laugh in various social situations, and the correlation between your joke telling and your stress levels. That's thorough. You have made 37 jokes in the past week. 62% were self-deprecating. 21% were observational humor about station life. The remaining 17% were attempts to deflect from uncomfortable topics. She looked up from her datapad with those sharp eyes. You use humor as a defense mechanism. I feel very attacked right now, so I'm going to make a joke about it, which I guess proves your point. Her ears perked forward. See, that response perfectly demonstrates the pattern. Have you been doing this kind of analysis on everyone, or am I special? Everyone, she said, completely serious. Though you are the most frequent subject due to proximity. I have discovered that Lieutenant Morrison touches her hair 47 times per hour when nervous. Engineer Park says, basically, every third sentence. And Dr. Williams from Astrophysics hums exactly 4 bars of the same song every time he enters a room. James leaned back, reassessing everything he thought he knew about his Xylarian counterpart. This is what you do with your free time. Catalog everyone's behavioral quirks. On Xylar, understanding subtle behavioral patterns is critical for survival. We may not have your wars and conflicts, but we have complex social hierarchies based on physical capability. Learning to read intent, stress, and deception through observation is a skill we develop young. She speared something on her plate that might have been attempting to be vegetables. Is this inappropriate? The research suggested humans value privacy, but most of what I am observing occurs in public spaces. It's not inappropriate exactly, just intense. Too much honesty again. Maybe a little. She nodded as if confirming a hypothesis. This explains the incident yesterday with Engineer Park. What incident? I told her that her anxiety about the power conduit inspection was physically manifesting through elevated cortisol levels that I could detect through scent, and that her competence was not in question despite her obvious stress. She seemed upset. James pinched the bridge of his nose. Sierra, you can't tell people you can smell their fear. Why not? It was meant to be reassuring. Humans generally don't find it reassuring to know that their emotions are literally broadcasting to anyone with enhanced senses. But they are already broadcasting. Your facial expressions, body language, vocal patterns. I am simply accessing additional data streams. She tilted her head. How do humans make decisions about each other if they ignore half the available information? Badly, we make decisions badly. That's why we invented therapy. She laughed, that resonant sound that made something in his chest tighten. Your species is fascinating. You have developed faster-than-light travel but cannot navigate basic social interaction without professional help. When you put it that way, it does sound ridiculous. Not ridiculous, endearing. She leaned forward close enough that he could see the subtle striations of color in her irises. I have another question, a personal one. Should I be worried? That depends on your tolerance for directness. Why do you sit farther away from me each day? James felt his face heat. I wasn't aware I was doing that. Your unconscious behaviors are quite revealing. Every day, you increase the physical distance between us by approximately 0.2 meters. At this rate, by week 4 you will be sitting at a different table entirely. Her expression softened slightly. Have I done something to make you uncomfortable? No, God no, the opposite actually. The opposite of uncomfortable is comfortable, yet you are retreating. I'm not. He stopped, recognizing the futility of lying to someone who could probably detect his elevated heart rate from across the room. Okay, maybe I am, but not because of anything you did wrong. Then explain it to me, help me understand. He set down his coffee, buying time. You remember in the gym when you asked if I found you attractive? I remember all of our conversations. My memory retention is significantly better than human baseline. Right? Well, the thing is, I do find you attractive, and interesting, and funny in this completely unexpected way. But you're also my assignment. We're supposed to be fostering diplomatic relations between our species, not. He gestured vaguely. Not what? Not whatever this is. And by this, you mean the mutual attraction that we have already acknowledged exists. Yes, that. Sierra sat back, processing. So humans have a rule that forbids attraction between colleagues. Not exactly a rule, more like a strong suggestion that it makes things complicated. But things are already complicated. We are from different species, different cultures, different evolutionary backgrounds. Adding attraction to that complexity seems minimal in comparison. You're not wrong, but... James, she said his name with careful precision. I am going to be direct again in the Zalarian way. I am attracted to you as well. Not just physically, though your species has its own aesthetic appeal. I enjoy your company. Your humor makes me laugh. Your curiosity about my culture is genuine rather than performative. And your attempts to maintain professional distance, despite obvious personal interest, are, frankly, adorable. Adorable, he repeated weakly. Yes, like a small animal trying to appear threatening. Her ears twitched with amusement. What I do not understand is why you consider this attraction a problem, rather than an opportunity to deepen our cultural exchange. Because if it goes wrong, we still have to work together for 5 more months. And if it goes right... He opened his mouth but couldn't find an answer. I propose an experiment, Sierra continued. For the next week you stop retreating, sit at your normal comfortable distance. Accept that attraction exists without trying to logic it away. We continue our work, our conversations, our friendship. We see what develops naturally rather than forcing distance that serves no purpose except to make you feel like you are following rules that may not even apply to our situation. That's a very rational approach to something that's not usually rational. I am Zalarian. We are quite good at applying logic to emotion. It is one of our strengths. She stood, collecting her tray. Think about it. And tomorrow at breakfast, please sit at 0.8 meters. The increasing distance is throwing off all my behavioral models. She walked away before he could respond, leaving him staring at his datapad without seeing it. His comm buzzed with a message from Sierra. Also, you touch your neck when you are uncertain. You have done it 14 times during this conversation. It is endearing. James looked down at his hand, currently touching his neck, and laughed despite himself. Maybe she had a point about the whole honesty thing. His comm buzzed again. That was joke number 38. I heard you laugh from the corridor. My hearing is quite good. He typed back, stop analyzing me. Unable to comply. You are too interesting. James smiled at his datapad like an idiot, and somewhere 3 corridors away, he was certain Sierra knew it. The alert klaxon shattered James awake at 0230, emergency lighting bathing his quarters in crimson. His comm implant crackled with rapid-fire updates from station control. Primary power failing, backup systems compromised, all personnel to emergency stations. He was halfway into his clothes when someone pounded on his door. Sierra stood in the corridor already fully dressed, her tactical suit glowing faintly with active systems. The main reactor is offline. Something about a cascade failure in the coolant distribution network. That's my section, James said, grabbing his equipment pack. I designed half of those biological filters. Then we should move quickly. She was already heading down the corridor at a pace that made him jog to keep up. Station control says they have lost contact with the backup control center. The automated systems are not responding. They rounded a corner and found their path blocked by a sealed bulkhead, red warning lights pulsing above it. Hull breach in the adjacent sector, Sierra said, reading the display. We need an alternate route. James pulled up the station schematic on his datapad, the screen flickering in the emergency lighting. We can go through the maintenance tunnels, but we will have to climb. Vertical access shaft about 40 meters. Lead the way. The maintenance tunnel entrance was behind a service panel that required both of them to pry open. Inside, the shaft stretched upward into darkness, emergency strips providing minimal illumination every few meters. James clicked on his headlamp and started climbing. Halfway up, the station shuddered. Metal groaned somewhere deep in the structure and James froze on the ladder. "Keep moving," Sierra called from below him. "Whatever is happening, stopping will not improve our situation." "Thanks, that's very comforting." I was not attempting comfort. I was stating tactical reality. Despite everything, he laughed. "You know, most people try to be reassuring during emergencies. I am not most people. Also, your laugh echoes interestingly in this shaft. The acoustics are quite good. Glad you're enjoying the ambience." They emerged into a corridor he barely recognized, the lighting reduced to dim emergency strips. His datapad showed they were close to the backup control center, but between them and their destination lay a section where artificial gravity had failed completely. "I am not trained for zero gravity," James admitted, "but I am." Sierra moved past him to the edge of the gravity-free zone. "Hold on to me." "What?" "Your species has a phrase, piggyback ride." Without waiting for confirmation, she grabbed his arm and pulled him onto her back. "Hold on." James wrapped his arms around her shoulders, acutely aware that this was possibly the least professional moment of his entire career. Sierra pushed off from the deck, and they sailed into the zero-gravity section. She navigated using handholds and structural elements with practiced ease, adjusting their trajectory with subtle movements. "You are heavier than I expected," she said conversationally. "Sorry for having mass during our emergency." "No apology necessary. I am simply recalculating. Your bone density is lower than Xylarian standard, but your overall body composition is denser than anticipated." "Are you seriously analyzing my body composition right now?" "I analyze everything constantly. It is how my mind works." She caught a handhold and changed their vector. "Also, you smell different when you are afraid versus when you are stressed. Fear has more adrenaline markers. Stress has elevated cortisol. Currently you are experiencing both, with a trace of something else I cannot identify." "That's probably embarrassment." "Ah yes, the human emotion that serves no survival purpose, yet consumes significant mental resources." They reached the far side of the gravity-free zone, and Sierra set him down with surprising gentleness. The backup control center was just ahead, its door sealed but not locked. Inside, the space was chaos. Screens flickered with error messages, and someone had abandoned their station mid-crisis, leaving datapads and equipment scattered across the consoles. "The automated restart sequence failed," James said, scanning the diagnostics. "It tried to restart the reactor without properly cycling the coolant system. If we do not fix this in the next 20 minutes, the backup systems will drain completely." "Tell me what you need." "I need you to manually override the coolant valves while I restart the biological filters. We have to do it simultaneously, or the system will lock us out again." Sierra moved to the environmental controls. "Where?" "Subsection D, valves 12 through 17. When I give the signal, open them in sequence, 2-second intervals." His hands moved across the controls, muscle memory taking over as he navigated through system menus he had helped design. The biological filters were the heart of the station's life support, converting waste products back into breathable atmosphere using engineered microorganisms. Elegant, efficient, and currently completely offline. "Ready," Sierra called. "On my mark, 3, 2, 1, mark." The station hummed as systems began cycling back online. James watched readouts climb toward nominal levels, then suddenly spike into dangerous territory. "Stop! Close valve 15, it is feedback looping." Sierra's hands moved before he finished speaking. The spike leveled off, then began dropping. Trying again, valve 15 isolated, rerouting through secondary channels. He keyed in a new sequence. Mark. This time the systems hummed smoothly into life. Lights flickered and strengthened throughout the control center. Gravity stabilized. The alarm klaxon ceased, replaced by the normal ambient sounds of a functioning station. James slumped against the console. "We did it." "Of course we did." Sierra moved away from her station. You are an expert in your field, and I am trained for crisis situations. Success was the most probable outcome. You have a very optimistic view of probability. She came to stand beside him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her after their exertion. James, I need to tell you something. If this is more analysis of my biochemical stress responses, maybe save it for later. No, something else. She was quiet for a moment, uncharacteristically hesitant. When the gravity failed and I told you to hold on to me, your heart rate increased dramatically, but it was not fear. Zira, let me finish. I've been watching you for weeks now, cataloging your behaviors, analyzing your patterns, treating you like a research subject because that felt safer than admitting what I was actually doing. What were you actually doing? Trying to understand if what I was feeling was real or simply the novelty of interacting with a different species. She turned to face him fully. On Xylar, we are taught that attraction is straightforward. Physical capability, genetic fitness, social compatibility. But with you, it is more complex. You are not physically stronger than me. By Xylarian standards, you would be considered fragile. And yet, the lights flickered, then held steady. And yet, he prompted. And yet when that debris started falling earlier and I moved to shield you, my body's response was not tactical calculation. It was instinctive protection. And that frightens me more than any system failure. James stared at her, his brilliant and analytical alien colleague who could track his heartbeat from across a room, but was somehow just as confused by her own feelings. For what it is worth, he said quietly, I stopped trying to maintain professional distance about 2 weeks ago. I have been sitting 0.8 meters away at breakfast, because that is the distance where I can hear you laugh without it being obvious I am paying more attention to you than my food. Her ears swiveled forward. You have been conducting your own observations. Apparently, you are not the only one who analyzes things. They stood there in the restored lighting of the backup control center, covered in maintenance tunnel grime, exhausted from crisis management. And James thought he had never seen her look more beautiful than in this moment of shared honesty. We should report back to station control, Sira said finally. We should. Neither of them moved. James. Yes, your heart rate is elevated again. I know, and this time it is definitely not fear. No, he agreed. It is definitely not fear. She smiled, and it was like gravity returning after freefall, a sudden sense of everything falling into proper alignment. Come on, she said. Let us go tell everyone we saved the station. Then perhaps we can continue this conversation somewhere, without quite so many emergency protocols involved. That sounds like a plan. They walked back through the recovering station together, and James discovered that 0.8 meters was actually a very comfortable distance after all. The observation lounge had become their unofficial meeting place over the past month. James arrived first, carrying 2 cups of coffee that no longer tasted quite so much like recycled disappointment. He'd learned the trick was adding the slightest bit of cinnamon, which the station botanist grew in a tiny hydroponic setup. Sira arrived moments later, her ears swiveling toward him before she even entered the room. You brought coffee, she said, sliding into the seat directly beside him, not 0.8 meters away, beside him. I brought coffee, though I still maintain it's basically a war crime what they do to these beans. You say that every morning, yet you continue drinking it. She accepted the cup, their fingers brushing. This is what humans call stubborn optimism, yes. That or addiction, hard to tell the difference. Outside the viewport, Mars hung in its usual position, but everything else had changed. The emergency 3 weeks ago had shifted something fundamental between them. They'd stopped pretending that professional distance was possible or even desirable. They still maintained appropriate behavior during official functions, but everyone on the station had noticed the change. Lieutenant Morrison had actually started a betting pool on when they'd make it official, which James found both mortifying and somehow endearing. I received communication from the Xylarian Council this morning, Sierra said, her tone carefully neutral. James's stomach dropped. Your assignment is ending early. No, the opposite actually. She pulled out her datapad, displaying an official-looking document covered in Xylarian script. They are proposing a permanent joint research station, a true collaborative effort between Earth and Xylar, focusing on xenobiology and cultural exchange. That's incredible. Where would they build it? They would not build it. They are proposing to use this station, with significant upgrades and expanded facilities. She swiped to another screen. They have requested that I remain as the Xylarian Director of Cultural Programs. You're staying. The relief was so intense it made him dizzy. If I accept, yes. There is one complication, however. She met his eyes. They will need an Earth Director as well. Someone with expertise in xenobiology, experience with cross-species collaboration, and a demonstrated ability to work with Xylarian personnel. I might know someone who fits that description. Do you? That would be convenient. Her ears twitched with barely suppressed amusement. Would this hypothetical person be interested in a permanent position that would involve daily interaction with a Xylarian who has been known to measure the distance between them at breakfast? I think this hypothetical person would be very interested, though they might have questions about the job requirements, such as whether the position includes tolerance for a coworker who can smell their emotions and analyzes their behavioral patterns for fun. Sierra laughed, setting down her coffee to pull up another document. Actually, about that, I have been compiling my observations into a proper research paper, comparative analysis of human and Xylarian nonverbal communication patterns. I was hoping you might review it before I submit it for publication. You're actually publishing your stalker notes. They are not stalker notes. They are rigorous scientific observations conducted with proper methodology. She paused, though I may have excluded some of the more personal findings, such as my notation that subject displays increased smile frequency when discussing shared meals, or that subject's pupil dilation correlates with observer proximity. Her expression softened. Some data is meant to be private. James took her hand, no longer caring who might see through the observation lounge windows. I have a confession. I've been keeping my own notes. You have? Nothing as scientific as yours. Just observations. Like how your ears flatten slightly when you're concentrating, or how you hum this 4-note pattern when you're thinking through a problem. It's not the same 4 notes every time, but it's always 4 notes. I do not hum. You absolutely hum. Ask anyone in the biology lab. She considered this, her ears doing exactly the flattening thing he'd just mentioned. Interesting, I was not aware of that behavior. What else have you observed? That you're brilliant and funny and surprisingly patient with a human who uses jokes to deflect from uncomfortable emotions. That you made a genuine effort to understand a culture completely different from your own, even when our social rules made no logical sense. That you're brave enough to be honest about what you want, which is something I'm still learning how to do. That you are doing better than you think. You have made 73 jokes in the past month, but only 19% were self-deprecating. You are becoming more confident. See, this is what I'm talking about. Who tracks joke percentages? Someone who cares about your emotional growth and well-being. She squeezed his hand. So, should we accept these positions? Together, I believe that is the implication, yes. Though we should probably make our relationship official before accepting joint command of an international research station. Official as in I would like to pursue a romantic relationship with you, James Riley, using a combination of human and Xylarian courtship traditions. We can maintain professional boundaries during work hours and explore personal compatibility during our off-duty time. I have already researched human dating customs extensively. Of course you have. I am nothing if not thorough. I have prepared a list of suggested activities, cross-referenced with your stated interests and dietary restrictions. You made a dating spreadsheet. I made an optimization matrix for shared recreational activities. She pulled up yet another document. See, I have accounted for variables such as preferred social settings, conversation topics of mutual interest, and probability of successful emotional connection. James looked at the incredibly detailed chart, complete with color coding and statistical projections, and felt something warm and certain settle in his chest. This was who she was. Analytical, honest, and so genuinely caring that she'd turned romance into a research project just to make sure she did it right. "This is the most romantic thing anyone has ever done for me," he said. "Really. I was concerned it might be too clinical. It's perfect, you're perfect, in a completely imperfect, alien, emotionally confusing way that somehow makes sense." Her smile could have powered the station. "Then we are in agreement. We accept the positions, pursue our relationship, and see what develops." Just like that. Just like that, humans overthink everything. Sometimes the logical choice is also the right choice. She stood, pulling him up with her. "Come. We should inform station control of our decision before Lieutenant Morrison's betting pool becomes more elaborate. I heard she is now taking bets on the date of our first kiss." "About that?" Sierra stopped walking. "Yes. I was thinking we could resolve that particular bet right now, if you're interested." Her ears swiveled forward, and her eyes brightened with something that might have been joy, or might have been triumph, or might have been both. "I am always interested in acquiring new data through direct experience." Was that a yes? "James, for someone who is supposed to be intelligent, you can be remarkably slow at interpreting obvious signals." He kissed her, and it was simultaneously exactly what he expected and nothing like he'd imagined. She tasted like coffee and cinnamon, and when she laughed against his mouth, he felt it resonate through his entire body. When they finally pulled apart, she was smiling in a way he'd never seen before. "Your heart rate increased by 47%, she said. "So did yours, I could feel it. Excellent observation skills, you are learning." She took his hand again. "Come, we have paperwork to file, announcements to make, and approximately 5 months of cultural exchange programming to redesign for a permanent facility. This will require extensive collaboration." "Extensive collaboration, is that what we're calling it?" "Among other things." Her ears twitched with amusement. "I am certain we will find many opportunities for close-quarters research." They walked through the station together, hand in hand, and James realized that somewhere along the way he'd stopped being the nervous xenobiologist who couldn't talk to an attractive alien without stumbling over his words. He'd become someone who could hold her hand in public, accept her analytical nature as a feature rather than a bug, and build something new in the space between their worlds. Outside the observation lounge windows, Mars gleamed red and constant. But inside the station, everything had changed and would keep changing, one carefully measured step at a time. Sierra's comm chimed. She glanced at it and laughed. "Lieutenant Morrison is demanding to know if the bet is resolved. She says multiple witnesses saw us in the observation lounge. This station has no privacy." "No," Sierra agreed, squeezing his hand. "But it has something better. It has us." And really, James thought, that was the best possible outcome anyone could have calculated.